格好してんだよマイ。服を着ろ。
別にフェイトのような子供に見られても恥ずかしくない。
俺が恥ずかしいんだよ。
やましいこと考えてる。
考えてないよ。
He was a filthy peasant boy with nothing to his name except a worthless skill named Gluttony. He thought his life would be over after getting bullied day in and day out, until one day when the hot holy knight Roxy helped him. As a result of this, he realizes the true strength of his skill, thus becoming the strongest person in the entire world, making it change around him. Episode 1. Within a nearby forest to the kingdom, a Hispanic man wanders around with hopes of transporting his goods until a group of filthy goblins stop him. He begs for help, and thanks to his calls, some warriors emerge to the rescue. These warriors end up killing all of the goblins, acting as if it's a big feat to take out such weak creatures. While there are strong people, there are also people like this guy, standing around starving from being poor. He stands in front of the gate, wishing he could earn some real money. But thanks to his worthless skill, he can never hope of such a thing. With his only skill being gluttony, a skill that makes him super hungry, he thinks all of his hope for this world is lost. Then suddenly a group of holy knights named the Valeric siblings are seen walking through town. Some stupid fool accidentally drops his fruit, so the knights decide to put him in their place. As they bully the peasant, the older of the siblings acts mature and tells them to leave the man alone already. After seeing this, the people wonder how they became holy knights in the first place. Meanwhile, our protagonist, Fate, gets approached by the holy knights who throw him some money on the ground thanking him for his work. They demand he get on his knees to pick it up, which they follow by striking him. One of the trio asks why he is so filthy, claiming it is making their family embarrassed. As he continues to get beat down on by the knights, another knight emerges claiming their actions are despicable. The girl, Roxy, claims that guarding the gate should be their job in the first place. She demands they stop picking on the filthy Fate, knowing there is no reason for it. Roxy then lends a hand to a peasant like him, but he decides to get up on his own, knowing it will only hurt him more if he accepts her help. She then informs him that it's a holy knight's duty to protect and serve, claiming if this happens again, she will deal with it. After hearing this, Fate tells her that he is used to it already, so she has no need to worry. Now that he has his day's pay, he heads to the bar to spend his small fortune. As he drinks his day away, he thinks of Roxy, wishing he could have a decent skill to sleep with her. Before we continue, let's take a moment to answer the question of the day. What year of anime had the best new series? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out in the next video. Now, back to the recap. Then suddenly he spots a thief jump the wall, so he runs to inform Roxy, who is guarding the door. She asks him to take care of the front, running into battle with her sword in hand. As he stands around, he overhears swords clashing, making him think the battle is over. He thinks this, but is stopped when another bandit comes running outside of the castle. He decides rather than falter, he will strike the man before him, piercing his chest. Thanks to the spear's strong tip, he ends up finishing the half-injured man off. Roxy then runs out and grabs his hand, hoping to comfort him. As she does, he can hear her inner voice making him wonder what is going on. She tells him that she needs to go report this to her superiors, so she will take her leave for now. Upon hearing this, Fate tells her she can take all of the credit, knowing if he took any, then the trio would pick on her more. She then asks him to let her show her gratitude for him thanks to his help. She proposes that he come work at her family's estate, informing him she has an opening. Once he hears this, he realizes she is treating trash like him, nicely causing him to think of the great future he might have. With all of this being said, he gladly accepts her request. That night before he leaves, he sits around in his trashy house wondering what these new skills are. He then remembers hearing Roxy's inner voice making him think it was telepathy. This also gives him the idea that he can defeat monsters if he continues to kill, so he looks around for a sword. The merchant sees him shopping and tries to help him, but soon realizes he is a peasant. He tells him his money is worthless here, pointing him to the garbage barrel. With no other option, Fate checks the swords around and finds a bunch of trash swords like expected. Eventually, he grabs a certain sword and realizes it's not as bad compared to the others. With it being treated like trash, he thinks it's the perfect one for him. As he thinks of this, the sword begins talking to him, introducing himself as Greed, someone much like him. Fate wonders what this sword is talking about, but decides to buy it regardless. On his way back, the trio talk about Fate's new job. They question how some trash like him could just leave them. showing despite how they treat him, they actually care for him. The older brother Rafale then leaves, telling his sister he is in search of the way to become immortal. Meanwhile, Fate walks around an open field with greed until he is approached by a goblin. With a single strike, he takes it out and gains a new skill, confirming his suspicions on his skill. As the saying goes, when you see one goblin, there are 100. Now, because 100 goblins are rushing him, he gets scared, but decides to fight back regardless, like he has no other option. As he kills the goblins, his gluttony skill continues to activate. This makes Fate happy, so he raises his sword and plans to head home, but greed stops him. He reminds him to loot the goblins in order to get paid for his efforts, so he does. Thanks to this, he earns more money than he has ever gotten before, so he plans on going to the strip club. As he thinks of this, greed stops him and claims he needs to repair him before he does anything else. On his way to the strip, he is stopped by a random man who holds a little girl with his hand begging for help. Because he has a skill called Conceal, he is able to hide his true stats to Fate, making him wonder if he should help or not. Regardless rushes in and follows him to some warehouse in the middle of nowhere. Knowing the guy is strong, he enters cautiously and watches while he beats up the girl. Episode 2. Within a church, a nun teaches the children about the god who grants them skills. With this god being named Laplace, it granted everyone various skills to advance further in life. One of the kids asks the nun why Laplace gave him a worthless skill when the holy knights are cruel. She explains that years back nobody had skills, so he must have gotten the short end of the stick. With no real explanation as to why she is more worried about Sahara, the kidnapped girl Fate is chasing. Meanwhile, she is seen getting enticed by the man, demanding she makes more noise for him. After he is done playing with her, he leaves, causing Fate to decide to take action. He walks over to her and frees her from her binding, hoping to gain some merit. Fate then tells her to hurry outside, but he's stopped when the man before him informs him he saw through it all. Fate knows that all he needs to do is get her to safety, not thinking about his own life. He then runs around the area, hiding behind various boxes. With the kidnapper assuming that Fate is a weakling, he walks towards him with confidence, not knowing what's soon to come. Fate knocks down some boxes and lands a hit, but it isn't enough. The kidnapper readies a skill and plans to attack, but his sword is cut through by greed. Now with him down for the count, he demands the kidnapper to explain himself and who hired him. He tells him that it was Hado, one of the 3 siblings that hired him with hopes of toying with her. With this information, Fate leaves enraged, but decides to cool his nerves while he takes Sahara back. He buys her a meat skewer, to which she is stunned by how good it is. She informs him that she has never had meat before, so this is life-changing for her. To show how much she enjoys the meat, she begins crying after eating her part, causing Fate to offer her his as well. He then takes her back to the church and says goodbye to her. With her thanking him, it happens to be the first time he is ever appreciated. That night, within his usual bar, the bartender is seen talking about how the head of the Hart family died from a dragon. With this meaning, Roxy will take over the clan. It's big news to hear. They then move on to asking where Fate is, noticing he hasn't been stopping by recently. In reality, Fate is starting a new life within the Hart estate, entering with a new outfit. He's then approached by Roxy once he enters the estate, welcoming him inside. She asks how he is doing, but he is love-struck, telling her she looks really good. Call him the Rizzler, the way he makes even one of the strongest and more noble girls blush. She then guides him further inside the place, eventually stopping at a grave. She tells Fate that this is her father, revealing he died 5 days ago in Gallia, a continent filled with monsters. Because one of the Holy Knight's duties is to prevent anything from spreading into their country, it's called the hardest job. As a result of this, her father ended up dying from a dragon within the continent. Despite this, Roxy is still happy to have him here, offering a hand to welcome him inside. He then follows her inside for lunch, where he gets to eat meat. After this, he goes outside to work, but gets told by some older guys that he is working too hard. They reveal he has been here for a week now, but is still acting weird. With him walking around talking to his sword and always having a growling belly, they question what's wrong with him. He is then called for by Roxy, causing Fate to wonder why his stomach is always growling. After some walking, he arrives at a garden with Roxy inside of it, pouring him tea. She asks how he is doing, but he ignores her, him only being able to think about his growling stomach. Eventually, he snaps out of it and tells her that he can relate to her father dying, his own dying to a monster attack. She tells him with this being similar between the two, they will be family from now on, considering he is working at her estate. This makes him happy, but he ends up passing out and waking back up within his room. He looks around and finds a note from Roxy telling him he can take the next day off. This causes Fate to ask Greed what's been happening to him. He informs Fate that since he started with his gluttony skill, there is no going back. If he doesn't continue to kill and gain skills, then he will either starve to death or go berserk. Because of this, he realizes that he needs to head out to kill some monsters. To do so, however, he makes sure to put on a robe, hiding his bloodshot eyes from them. Greed informs him that because he hasn't eaten everything around him, will look good. After some time, Fate eventually arrives at the goblin's lair, where he kills them all to try and satisfy his hunger. Despite killing hundreds, it's not enough, so he decides to take it up a notch, heading into the hobgoblin forest. Here, he kills all of them with ease, making him wonder how much he needs to kill until he is satisfied. Upon killing all of the monsters in the forest, his hunger calms down, making him wonder if he will have to do this for the rest of his life. Right when he thought it was over, a new foe approaches with a human in hand. Greed reveals it's a goblin king, a monster much stronger than he has faced before. On top of it, having tons of skills for him to acquire it, has a regeneration skill making him know it would help him get much stronger. With this in mind, he decides to take it on, sneaking up behind it. He then jumps down and lands a hit on the goblin king, taking off its arm. After doing so, he evades its incoming attacks and looks for an opening to strike again. Thanks to his own skill and Greed's guidance, he rushes in and delivers the final blow. Like usual, his Gluttony skill activates this time, giving him a massive strength boost, unlike any before. Greed also informs him that with his new stat level, he can activate his next form. In exchange, however, he needs to hand over all of his stats, meaning Fate will go back to square one. He tries to deny the request, but Greed tells him that he is the same as him, being able to constantly grow as he donates stats. He accepts the request, and all of his stats are infused into his sword, creating a new form, a magic bow. At first he thinks it's useless, but Greed tells him to try it out, shooting a nearby goblin spying on them. He tries it out and realizes it's completely overpowered with the bow, giving him the ability to use homing arrows infinitely. He also decides to loot the Goblin King's ears in order to provide them to the church, thus making sure they have sufficient money for a bit. Episode 3. Later that week, when he does his job as usual, he notices Roxy sneaking around, so he shouts out, exposing her. She tells him to be quiet, explaining she is going into town to get away from everything. After hearing this, he realizes why she is sneaking around, knowing Haru would punish her if she got caught. He decides to keep it a secret, thus promising to get back to work. When he does, she stops him and asks for him to become her escort, acting as if it won't be more obvious they are missing. They then head into town together, treating it more like a date rather than an inspection. He calls Roxy by her name, causing her to inform him that he can't do that. She proposes he call her Lexi, instead thinking it will help her keep her identity safe. Greed tells him he should have known this already, so Fate tells him to shut up, ruining his moment. Roxy assumes he is talking to her, so she gets sad, but eventually they ease the tension. Greed makes another rude comment to him, thus forcing Fate to pick up his sword and yell at it again. After some time, they eventually arrive at the town square, where their secret inspection starts to turn more and more into a date. As they talk, a holy knight walks through town, causing the townspeople to become fearful. They all bow their heads, not wanting to cause him trouble until Fate's stomach growls. Greed tells him some nonsense, so he tells him to shut up per usual. The knight overhears this, so he approaches Fate, asking what he said to him. Fate immediately grovels at the floor and begs for forgiveness, causing Roxy to intervene. People start to notice her identity, thus causing Fate to put up a ploy. He acts all lovey-dovey with her, thus making everyone think there is no way the knight Roxy could have a boyfriend. Roxy then apologizes to the knight as well, lowering everyone's suspicion. With this being done, they run away into a back alleyway, still having their arms linked. Because of this, Fate overhears her inner voice, realizing this is her first time she has done something like this before. He pulls back, and the two continue exploring the town until they arrive at another merchant's shop. With there being gems dazzling in the sunlight, Roxy takes a large interest in them. Included in this merchant's shop are a few ores that he claims is like a gamble, with some of them holding gems and others not. It's really up to them to pick the gem they want. As they look at the merchant's goods, he notices Roxy taking a large interest in a certain gem. The merchant tries to sell the gem to him, offering a discount, but Roxy informs him she doesn't want it. After seeing this, Fate follows behind her, where she asks him if has any warrior friends, finally getting to business. While they walk, he overhears some people talking about a ton of dead goblins nearby, wondering who took them out. They think it must be some kind of monster, knowing the run-of-the-mill person couldn't do it. Upon hearing this, Roxy chases after them, asking for more details, but they have no clue about it. Because of this, Roxy asks him to show her somewhere that warriors gather, revealing her special inspection is finding more information about this wandering monster. He then enters his usual bar and finds a flower at his usual spot. The bartender claims that it's where someone he used to know died, so he can't sit there. He quickly realizes Fate, the one he thought had died, so he asks what he's been up to. He assumes that Roxy is his girlfriend, realizing he has just been sleeping around. After hearing this, Roxy smashes her cup after letting her emotions take control, causing Fate to do the same. They are then presented with some food and drink, while the bartender explains what he knows about the wandering monster. With whoever is killing these monsters leaving all of the loot, everyone speculates it's some kind of monster. After this, some warriors enter the bar and approach Roxy, asking for them to hang out. Immediately, she flicks him back, making them realize Roxy isn't just some random girl. With this being Lady Roxy, the Holy Knight, they all apologize for their misdeeds. They beg for their lives to be spared. After this is done, he heads to the Hart family's blacksmith in order to finally repair greed. They then wander around town some more until they find Hado, the trio who tried to kidnap a child previously. He is seen messing with some kid, so Roxy and Fate stop him, claiming that he needs to stop acting so rude. They take these words with anger, eventually running off while telling Fate they will deal with him later. Once this is all done, Roxy apologizes to the kid, learning that he is missing his mom. After some time of wandering around the slums, the kid's stomach growls, so they decide to buy him some snacks. This makes Fate remember a time years ago when he was helped by a holy knight as well, who just so happens to look identical to Roxy. After a full day of looking around, they find the kid's mom, so they release him, finally being able to head home. Upon arriving, they get an earful from Haru as expected for staying out all day. That night before heading to bed, Fate wonders if he will be able to hunt monsters without Roxy knowing, so he gets an idea. He decides to buy a mask to cover up, purchasing one of the gotcha stones in the process. By using his identity skill, he is able to get the rock with the exact gem Roxy was looking for. Meanwhile, within the castle, the knights talk about what knight to send in next to take over the Gallia raid. Episode 4. Later that week, after killing all of the goblins, a group of warriors notice the pile of goblins standing before them. Because they assume he is a lich, they begin calling him Corpse, making him feel happy by getting a cool nickname. Despite him killing all of these monsters, he knows he needs to get even stronger for when the Holy Knights come after him. The following morning, when he wakes up and gets to work, the double life exhaustion begins catching up on him. While he works, Roxy approaches and informs him she wants to show him something. This leads to a full day of traveling until they eventually arrive at the grape vineyard. She informs him that she wanted to show him where they are made, him eating the grapes and enjoying them previously. Upon arriving, they are greeted by Roxy's hot mom, asking who the man beside her is. Roxy introduces him as Fate, a servant of hers, but she instantly notices his true intentions. She welcomes him here and asks how he feels about her daughter. This causes Roxy to begin blushing, asking her mom not to ruin their moment together. Her mother informs them that as his employer, it's her duty to know. After hearing this, Fate tells her that he cares deeply for Roxy, bowing down and asking to serve her forever in the process. In turn, this causes her to run off to her room while blushing. The next morning, Fate gets to work like the filthy servant he is, but soon realizes the workers are a bunch of bums. With them taking the grapes and making wine out of it by themselves, they don't get much work done. As they drink, one of the workers talks about Roxy's upbringing to Fate. He reveals that she comes every year to not only help them harvest, but also kill all the monsters that come by hoping to eat the fruit. He points to the north and explains that there are a ton of monsters up there. After hearing this, his stomach growls, showing he wants to get a piece of these monsters. After his work, he is told by Roxy to head back alone, her having work to do still. As he walks home, he notices a small girl holding a large axe, causing him to wonder who this is. He decides to continue forward regardless, but gets stopped by her. With her having eyes like his own when he gets hungry, he is immediately stunned. He asks her what she needs, to which she explains that she is too early for him. She explains that she came for the kobolds. After seeing him, she will allow him to have them. Fate asks Greed who that was, but he refuses to tell him anything, hiding her true identity. Because of this, Roxy ends up catching up to him, asking if he knew the Gallian that passed them. He asks what that is, to which she explains that the Gallians are people who are originally from the demon-infested continent Gallia. Because a majority of the people were wiped out, just seeing her is a first for the both of them. With this being done, they head back home, where Fate asks her some questions along the way. He asks if she will be all right fighting the monsters up north, to which she tells him she can surely do it. Because she flexed while saying this, she dropped half the grapes, making their progress worthless. The next morning when they wake up, they find the entire grape field rampaged, causing them to set out to fight the kobolds. Upon inspecting them, they find a large group of them along with a kobold king, a monster stronger than anything any of them have ever seen before. After seeing this, Fate's hunger begins to take over, making him realize it's about time he get into some action. The group decide to head back for now, where Roxy claims to the others that she will defeat it. This gives them hope, knowing they stand no chance against it. After she says this, Greed informs Fate that she stands no chance against it, thus meaning he will need to defeat it if he wants to help her. With this in mind, he vows to take out the Kobold King despite him knowing he is lower level than it. That night he sets out to fight it, where he finds a bunch of low-level kobolds in front of the king. He decides to take out them first in order to raise his level, hoping that by doing so he will get high enough to take on the boss. Thanks to his overpowered bow, he is easily able to shoot down all of the kobolds, making them seem like easy pickings. As he fights, he eventually is forced to move in close, taking out the right-hand men to the king. After they are defeated, he levels up even more, eventually getting close to the level needed to take on the king. Despite this, he is still a bit too low level, so he charges up his bow with hopes of taking out more kobolds. When he sends in his next strike, however, the king catches it, forcing him to charge in close. He attempts to strike, but soon realizes the Kobold King is charging up a powerful skill. Because of this distraction, another kobold lands a hit on him, thus allowing the king to send in his skill. This causes Fate to fall to the ground, making the others think he is out for the count. Hastily, however, Fate gets right back up and reveals he was faking it to land a cheeky blow. This allows him to take out one of the kobolds, so he rushes towards the other, taking it out as well. Now with only the king remaining, he uses his ultimate skill, accessible thanks to Greed. In exchange for this skill, he donates 10% of his stats, but achieves the ultimate power. With a single strike, he pierces through the king, thus ending the battle. Because of how powerful the attack is, it ends up leaving a large hole in the ground, making him wonder how he is going to cover this one up. Then suddenly the power increase hits him with it, being more power than he has ever taken in before. It causes him to scream in agony from the sudden increase. The next morning when Roxy arrives at the scene, she is stunned to see the kobolds defeated and the large hole left by some attack. She wonders who could do it, but eventually thinks it has to be the Galian girl she saw earlier. A week after these events, he goes about killing as usual until one night, when he sits down at the bar, he hears surprising news. Firstly, he overhears that the Holy Knights plan on sending Hado. Secondly, he learns that the Knights have also decided to send Roxy in as the new replacement for the Gallia exploration. When Fate hears this, he begs for Roxy to reconsider, knowing she is sure to die if she goes. Even with this knowledge, she marches forward, telling Fate she will avenge her father's death. After hearing this, Fate heads out into the goblin fields waiting for Hado, knowing he had a hand in sending her over to Gallia. Episode 5. With Hado staring him down, he asks if this is Corpse standing before him. Without even confirming it, he sends in his men, but as you can expect, they quickly get taken out. With a single hit, he murders all of them, showing no mercy. After seeing this, the others run away in fear, leaving only Hado to fight. He knows if he backs down here, then he will have no pride, so he prepares his sword. Now, with only the two of them on the battlefield, Fate takes off his mask, revealing himself to Hado. This causes Hado to question how trash like him could get so strong, but he decides to fight regardless. To start, he checks out his stats, hoping to confirm he is much stronger. After doing this, he asks if Greed can slash through a holy sword, making Hado think he is crazy. He assures himself that his Holy Knight skills will be enough, but as he sends in this strike, Fate appears behind him. He then slices through his holy sword, making Hado realize how strong he really is. Fate demands he pick his broken sword up, but he begins backing up in fear. He eventually stumbles upon a dead body, making Fate realize how worthless this man really is. He asks him what happened to his past attitude, always treating him like a nobody. Because of these pent-up feelings, he beats Hado to a pulp without killing him. He tortures him as much as he can, reminding him of all the people he has harmed during his life. Fate tells him that if anyone is trash, then it's him. Fate changes his sword into bow form and sends in his ultimate strike, but makes sure to hold back some of his power. With this attack taking out his arms and legs, Hado is left with no way to continue moving. As he is already defeated, he begs to be killed already, but Fate refuses until he gets the information he wants. He asks why he sent Roxy into Gallia, but Hado informs him that she volunteered on her own. He refuses to believe it at first, but realizes that it is something that Roxy would say. Hado begs one last time to be spared, but Fate shows him no mercy, stabbing through his chest, claiming it's his own revenge. After killing him, he acquired his stats along with his Holy Knight skills, making him able to become a knight himself. Despite this, he tells himself he would never want to lower himself to the knight's level, thinking of them as the issue with this world. Thanks to him acquiring these stats, Greed explains he can upgrade himself as well. Fate agrees, so he wields a new weapon, a scythe with the ability to slice through anything. The next day, Roxy officially sets out for Gallia with plans of leaving for the next 3 years to clear the monsters. She says goodbye to everyone, and ends up wishing Fate good luck in his future endeavors, promising to meet him again in the process. With this being said, she leaves, causing Fate to wonder what to do next. He decides his only option is to set out and support her from the back end. Before he left, Haru and the others gave him a large sum of money, wishing him the best. As this happens, a busty blue-haired girl talks about how everything is going according to her plan. Roxy, on the contrary, stands atop a stage, welcoming all the new soldiers to fight under her. She gives a speech to them asking for their help, thus gaining all of their trust. Along with the large number of soldiers, a few warriors joined as well, hoping to help Roxy be successful. While all of this goes on, a mad scientist inspects monster corpses and realizes that the person named Corpse is more remarkable than they thought. With them learning he uses magic arrows, it allows them to understand there is only one possible way he could have used these. They claim he has a weapon of mortal sin, one of the strongest weapons that can manipulate magic at will. With little information surrounding these weapons, they claim they are the strongest weapons within this world. After a bit of traveling, Fate finally arrives at a neighboring town to where Roxy is currently stationed, Tetra. Although he hasn't reached her just yet, when he previously came here, he was thrown out for being so filthy. Flash forward to the present, and Set is now on his knees begging Fate to help him. He explains that their village is going to be destroyed unless he gets someone's help. Because of how he was treated, he is hesitant at first, but decides to accept Set's request regardless. With him still hating Set and the village, he doesn't want to go, but hopes to save his father's memories. When he arrives at the village, the people ask how they could bring trash like Fate back, thinking he is some worthless man. They claim that they will use him as a sacrifice to hold off the monster, thus angering Fate. He decides to restrain himself, following Set into his house. With Set treating him with kindness, the two begin talking, where he reveals his wife was killed by one of these monsters. He looks back on his past self and realizes how wrong he was, having a daughter of his own now. This reminds Fate of his own father looking after him, so he begins asking more about the monsters. Set explains in detail these monsters, eventually allowing Fate to learn that they are gargoyles, a strong flying-type monster. Because of how strong they are, Set's daughter offers him some candy with hopes of befriending him. He eats it without hesitation, and the two begin playing all night. Eventually, Fate passes out wondering what happened. Set's daughter reveals that she gave Fate some candy that her grandfather gave her, now knowing it was actually a poison. Right when this happens, the monsters begin invading the village, causing them to panic. Episode 6. After sending in a single blow, they destroy entire houses, making everyone seem like death is going to happen. While all of this happens, Fate continues sleeping away while Set attempts to find a cure for him. The chief, on the other hand, runs around looking for Fate, screaming he will be the sacrifice. He quickly gets eaten up while Fate finally wakes up after Set informs him of what's going on. With monsters rampaging outside, Fate decides it's his turn to head outside and save the town. Despite his attempts, he quickly realizes he is far too late, with everyone already being the monster's dinner. Fate then checks them out and learns that the best option would be to use the new form, the scythe. With this in mind, he quickly switches its mode into the scythe version, striking the monsters in the process. He slices one out, thus drawing the attention of all of the others. They send in a combo attack, but thanks to Fate's new weapon, he slices right through it. He follows this by throwing his scythe to cut up the remaining monsters as well. After doing this, the leader emerges before him, but it happens to be lower level than Fate is. With this information, he rushes towards it without a second thought, slicing it in half in the process. Now, with all of the monsters defeated, the only ones left are Set and his daughter, causing him to realize this village is done for. Included with the villagers dying, the soil is all demolished, making it a bad place to grow crops at. This causes Set to realize he is identified, so he asks how he got so strong. Fate decides to reveal a bit about himself, explaining he has no choice but to fight. Now, with everything else done, Fate pays his respects to his father's grave one final time, informing him he has found his way around life now, so he has nothing to worry about. While this happens, Roxy arrives further into the kingdom, getting near to Gallia. Because it's such a long journey, she still hasn't arrived, leaving Fate some time to get closer to her. As he travels through the area, he assures the man taking him that everything will be all right. Then suddenly, after he says this, the cliché happens with a group of thugs appearing before him. Fate steps up to the stage and assures the traveler that he will take care of these people. While he talks, the thugs claim that they will defeat him with ease. As they do this, something falls from the sky, making Greed know there is only one person who could be behind this. With it being the Galian girl, they are stunned to see her. She asks the traveler for a ride, but as she enters, she ends up tipping the entire carriage over. With this being done, she asks her weapon, Sloth, to go back to normal. Now with them on the road, she introduces herself as Mine of Wrath, explaining she also has one of the mortal sin skills. In exchange for getting questions answered, he gives her some food, but she ends up eating all of it. Eventually, they arrive in town where they notice a holy knight protecting a blonde girl. Two ghost-looking figures attempt to attack her, but he saves her like a beast. He introduces himself as the Lord of the Land Rudolph. These actions make all of the other girls impressed by his feats, including the traveler who took him. He explains that this man will soon be embarking on the journey to Gallia alongside Roxy. Before he heads out, he hands Fate his money, but it is all stolen by Mine. This doesn't bug him at all, however, only using the traveler as a way to get to this town rather than earn some money. The two then head further into town, where they are constantly greeted by random people welcoming them into town. After doing so, they walk away, and Fate notices a strange symbol on their necks. He walks around some more and notices everyone within the town has some kind of symbol on their necks. Greed explains that it is surely the difference between their social classes. Upon hearing this, Greed realizes he is definitely a bad guy, so he decides to further inspect him. As this happens, the Lord is seen punishing the men who played the role as ghosts for him. He claims they did a terrible job, so he ends up killing both of them as a way to exert his authority. That night when he goes to sleep, Fate stares at her body, asking Greed how he knows her. He reveals that not only is Mine someone like him with a deadly sin skill, but her weapon, Sloth, is also a mortal sin like himself. With all of this being said, he decides to finally explain what these sins and skills truly are. Consisting of a total of 7 sins, these skills were born as ways to defy logic itself. In particular, he informs Fate that his sin is one of the strongest with the ability to change the world. After hearing this, he wonders why he was given this skill, having thought it was something worthless all along. He thinks his power is still useless, wishing he could just have a normal skill that didn't require him to constantly kill. He then sets out that night to get his fill, hoping to find some kind of strong monster to take on. Doesn't take him long to find a sand monster, in which he tries out a new skill. By adding Fireball to his magic arrow, he deals massive damage to the monster, taking it out with a single hit. As this happens, Mine wakes up and wanders around looking for food. She eventually notices a poster claiming that anyone who defeats a Sandman can get a massive reward. Meanwhile, Fate continues exploring and killing the sand monsters until he finds the boss monster. Because it is twice the size of regular ones, the people hoping to claim the reward struggle to land a single hit. Despite this, Fate takes it on himself, knowing he is strong enough to take anything down. With his combination attack, he sends in fire arrows at the monster, pushing it back. Because of its high defense, however, it withstands these attacks, eventually forcing Fate to change his battle plan. He switches Greed to Scythe mode and slices towards the monster, taking out his core with a single hit. This doesn't finish it off, however, so he uses his magic bow's ability, giving up 20% of his stats in the process. In turn, he strikes the runaway core, ending the monster's chance at regaining its strength for good. As a result of using such a powerful attack, he blows a huge hole in the ground, stunning the people around him. They thank him for his help and ask for his name before leaving. He introduces himself as Corpse. The next morning, when Fate gets back home, he finds Mine completely undressed, making him stunned. She then tells him that she's going to fight the Sand Golden, but he explains he already defeated it. With there being a 100 gold coin reward, he promises to give her half, knowing she was planning on killing it herself. Fate is then approached by the Lord of the Land, informing him he is now under his wing. Mine protests this decision, claiming Fate serves under him. Of course, he doesn't back down, so Mine decides to just strike him, thus forcing him to stop bullying them.